We're honored to be the stewards and custodians of this historic building. It's a great place because it's the only church in downtown that survived the Great Fire of 1901, number one. And number two, the fact that it has been restored and activated to a useful purpose in the 21st century, that reflects a major part of the mission of the Jacksonville Historical Society, which is to advocate for historic preservation and the adaptive reuse of our historic buildings in the 21st century. So what greater example and what greater place to have a speaker series event, of which this is one that we try to do most months and in some cases twice a month. And every February we devote some of our speaker series programming to Black history. And this evening's program is faithful to that. And in a moment, I'll introduce our program's chair, Dr. David Jameson, and he'll introduce the program itself. But first, let me thank all of you for coming out to join us and be witnesses to this, and I hope participants when we have some discussion later. I am Alan Bliss. I'm CEO of the Jacksonville History Center and Jacksonville Historical Society. The Historical Society is re-identifying itself, rebranding itself this year as the Jacksonville History Center. How come? First of all, we think it is that name is more faithful to our mission and our purpose of public education about Jacksonville's history. Number two, we have for a number of years been sort of concerned that the term society seems exclusive and makes it sound as though it is a group of people who prefer to discuss history among themselves and keep everybody else outside the room. That is not at all what we're about. And that leads me to the third point, which is that the term History Center is faithful to the idea of inclusion and a wide, broad, citywide, Jacksonville-wide approach to collecting and preserving and sharing the stories of this complicated city. So that's the Jacksonville History Center. We continue to be faithful to the mission of the people who established this organization 95 years ago this May, founded on May 3rd, 1929. And this remains the only public history organization that serves all of the city of Jacksonville. We do it with the support of the Cultural Council of Greater Jacksonville, a number of philanthropic foundations, significant donors, a number of corporate partners, and the Cultural Council of Greater Jacksonville, which is funded through a blanket master appropriation from the city of Jacksonville. And we also do our work with the support of individual members. And I hope that includes every one of you. But just in case you're among those who has not yet become a member of the Jacksonville History Center, we are prepared to help remedy that condition with some membership information that's available at the welcome table. And we would be really honored to have you with us in the work that we do every day in advancing, strengthening Jacksonville's citizenship through public history education. So with that, thank you again for being here, and I'll turn the microphone over to JHS board member, Dr. David Jameson, a colleague in the practice of teaching history. He's a member of the faculty at Edward Waters University, and is now on his second term as a member of the board of directors of this organization, and he is in many ways a great Jacksonville citizen. We're honored to have him with us in our work, and I'm honored to introduce him to you. Welcome, Dr. Jameson.
Thank you, Alan, and thank you to everyone who has come here tonight. Thank you so much for our guests, our panelists. This is an important evening because this is real history being made. As you may or may not know, the stories of people in the African community oftentimes are not recorded, and the stories of the first people in certain institutions in cities oftentimes aren't recorded unless we take the action to make it happen. And tonight we are doing a part of historical record. We are really listening to the stories of people who broke barriers, and not just broke barriers in their fields, but were risking their lives daily to break these barriers. If you have any love for your region, the people around you, your neighborhood, you have to have love for the people who made it a mission to protect those people and protect that area. So I'm just honored to be here, to be in the presence of these people, and very appreciative for all of you to be here to show them the respect that they are due. This evening was inspired by some oral histories that I initiated as a part of the social justice organization 904. After the horrible tragedy of George Floyd in Minneapolis 2 years ago, we were listening to the calls in America to do something, to make a change. And we were realizing a lot of those were coming from the Black community. And we were wondering, well, what does Black law enforcement have to say about it? These are people that are sort of in that crossroads, that cultural nexus between what they do, what they dedicate their lives to, and their identity. So their words are important. So I would like to first start off by just having them introduce themselves by, if you can give your name, your rank when you retired, and then how many years you were on the force, and then we'll start with questions. But I'd like you to first introduce yourselves if you could.
Okay, I guess I'm first. Well, no, ladies first. No, I'm just kidding. My name is Ken Jefferson. I'm a lifelong native here of Jacksonville, Florida. Grew up on the north side, a place called Washington Heights, 4229 Moncrief Road, just in case you want to know. I had the honor of serving with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office for 24 years in numerous capacities. During my 24-year career. I retired in 2010. I currently serve as the crime and safety expert for First Coast News, previously with News for Jackson, as well as Fox 30 CBS 47.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Rita Smith Campbell. I'm the first Black female police officer hired by Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. The road was rough. But anyway, I did 42 years and 2 months. I retired in 2006. It was 34 years, and then I went on to become a bailiff at the courthouse. And I did retire as an officer, as Ken Jefferson had said, that I did numerous positions there, but I injured myself due to an injury. I was hit by a car and I ended up with scoliosis with a dislocated spine. But anyway, that ended my career basically. I'm sorry. So, but anyway, I ended up just doing that as an officer. And I am retired. I don't like speaking.
That was great. Thank you.
My name is Juanita Dixon. When you're in the police academy, you get a nickname. Mine was JJ because my first and middle name started with a J. And so for the last probably 30-something years, I've been JJ to everybody. I retired from the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office in 2014 after 26 years of service. I retired as an officer. I am currently the president of the Jacksonville Brotherhood of Police Officers. That is our minority police organization. I've been the president for the last 12 years, and in addition, I work for the Florida State Labor Council representing police officers throughout the state of Florida, predominantly Northeast Florida, and so that's a little bit about it.
Please remember, I guess, to keep the mic close to your
Okay. My name is Chris Robinson. Much like Jefferson, I worked in many areas in the police department. I was the city's game coordinator for about 4 or 5 years, as well as an intelligence officer and dignitary protection. I had the unfortunate pleasure of backstopping a couple of bullets in 1976, but I survived, so I'm good. I retired after 35 years on the department. At present, I'm still teaching out of the Police Academy for new officers in crisis intervention, and how to handle the emotionally disturbed when they come across that.
Thank you so much, Officers Jefferson, Smith, Dixon, and Robinson. We're going to get to the history, but with this police, am I not saying it correctly? Would you like to, Smith? Ken?
I'm so sorry. She recently got married, and I keep getting in trouble because I've only known Smith forever.
Campbell.
It's Campbell. Thank God he's not even there.
So, as I was saying, with this amazing collection of law enforcement brain power, I would like to get to a nugget first, just to get your reaction on it. As I mentioned, this project was initiated after the horrible tragedy in Minneapolis, and many of us have seen awful video of the death of George Floyd. And after this event, many people started to hear the calls to defund the police, that we don't need as many police in our neighborhoods, that we need to devote resources in other ways. So I'd like to, if I could, just get each of your perspectives. There are many black mothers in America who are now hearing these arguments, and they're wondering to themselves, would my child be safe in police custody? What do you say to these mothers of America?
Those are legitimate concerns from the mothers in light of things that we see on a regular basis via Facebook, TikTok, the mainstream media. We see all these issues and and things that are happening in our society. Talking about George Floyd and that particular incident, and talking about defunding the police, I don't know why people even position their mouths to even say that, other than being emotional at the time, because you can't defund the police, ever even consider doing that, because outside of the police we'll have anarchy. Everything will be out of control, crime will be rampant. I had the opportunity as a crime and safety expert with one of the stations I work with, I can't remember which one, to talk about this when it was happening. What you saw was a worldwide protest about that particular injustice. And my response to some of that was, this is nothing new, it's just now being recorded. People have cell phones now, they have ways to record things. Businesses have cameras hooked up now inside and outside, more so than they did back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And so it's now being exposed to the general public, and that's what's causing the backlash on police. Now, mind you, I started the police academy well after Ms. Campbell and well after Detective Robinson. I started in '86, and police work back then was different than it is now. Back then, we could lawfully do a lot of things that now being contested in court with the purpose of just serving justice, protecting and serving, taking that literally for what it says, protect and to serve. But now you got to protect yourself while you're serving. So defunding the police is always a bad idea, it's a bad choice, and anybody that thinks that way is just speaking from emotion.
I believe that defunding the police, as Officer Johnson has said, but there's some issues now that we have more rampant than ever due to drug use, mental health issues. We need money diverted for that. There's so many people, young people, old PTSD, drug use has caused a lot of us to have mental issues. And as you can see, half of the people that go to school, that should be schooled, they have mental problems. There's some money need to be spent in that area. And wherever it comes from, not the police, because we still do need the police, but some money need to be spent toward mental health issues.
I'll speak from an organizational perspective. being kind of the leader of the Minority Police Association. When all of that happened, it caused our organization to have to sort of do a call to action with our members, because we had not only coworkers but family members and friends and neighbors who were looking to us as African American police officers to help them understand what was going on and what was going to be done about it. And so as an organization, we got together and we outlined some things that we took an oath amongst each other that we would do. You know, reporting things when we saw things that were not right. Not that it's rampant in law enforcement, especially here in our city, but if we saw something that was not right, we made a commitment that we would report that. We made a commitment that we would better educate the community on how to interact with law enforcement. We made a commitment that we would try to educate law enforcement on how to interact better with the community, that we would divert funds from our organization to provide training for police officers, not just black ones, but any police officer that felt that they needed more training in learning about cultural diversity and how to deal with people. And so as an organization, we put some wheels in motion to try to, you know, kind of help people to understand what was going on and how we would deal with it. I remember we were invited to a community forum during that time, and Ken, you were there with me, and there were people there that were demanding that we had black police officers to police black communities and white police officers to police white communities. And I think we were some of the only ones that stood up and said that is not a good idea. And we took a beating that night for that. And I'll never forget, Steve Zoma, who was the president of the FOP, came to me afterwards and said, "Thank you so much. I thought I was going to get beat up on, but you got beat up on for saying that." But as an organization, we really took a stance that we knew that as law enforcement officers, black ones or minority ones, we needed to stand up and say something to the community to help them understand more about policing and why there was such a need for us to, you know, to maintain our police forces throughout the country. And yes, money does need to be diverted towards other issues, but law enforcement has to be one of the top priorities in our country. If we don't have law and order, we can't do anything else.
As our president, JJ, said, this organization, which was formed well before she came on, was dedicated to trying to mitigate some of the happenstances that were going on with our officers on this department. Since I came on in the 70s, I have a different perspective. As a young officer, Broad Street was a line that I could not cross. I was an officer who could only arrest blacks. I was an officer who could only ride black areas. The organization that we formed fought this. I have notes where we spoke with Sheriff Carter about some of the issues, pretty much like Floyd, that was actually happening here in the 70s, where we had an individual shoot a carjacking suspect who was allegedly armed with a knife, which was subsequently proven was thrown down by the officer. It was enough to start a riot in this city, which we were. So, looking at all of that, defunding the police is not a good idea from my perspective. Even with all of that, we still are needed. It is still a worthy profession. We cannot stain all of the good work that is done by the majority of officers out there by the few who do bad. It is our job then is to try and find a way to get these individuals out of law enforcement.
Thank you. We'll revisit that topic in a moment, but first I'd like to, if I could, hear about each one of your experiences, or I guess I should say, if you could recall the memories that you had that inspired you to become members of law enforcement? The first things that you were like, okay, that's what I want to do. I want to help protect people. If you could share that with us, I appreciate it.
I'm sitting too close to you. So that's easy for me because I knew from 5th grade what my calling was, what I wanted to do. I come from corporate America, but before I tell you that, what inspired me the most was when I was in 5th grade in Solomon's class at Rufus E. Payne Elementary School. A guy by the name, an officer by the name of Marvin Young came to our class as Officer Friendly. Now, by the show of hands, how many of you remember Officer Friendly? Some of y'all are as old as I am, so you should be able to remember Officer Friendly. He came in, it was a bunch of 5th graders in this classroom, and the teacher was out. And you know what 5th graders do when the teacher's out? We're doing all kinds of things, throwing spitballs and pulling girls' hair and all that kind of stuff. Just unruly. And when he walked in, his uniform neatly worn, everything was pressed, it was sharp, straight. He didn't say a word. We saw him, we immediately went to our seats and shut up because authority had just walked in. And he began to tell us a story about the role of a police officer, not the you do bad and you commit a crime, you go to jail. I lived in Washington Heights, so I saw that every day. You offend the law, police are called, you go to jail. But he talked about the role that the officer plays in society, how he or she can be a role model, how he or she can make the community feel safe when they come up and they have that authority just to take the bad out of your community. When he told us that, when he went over that speech, I raised my hand in 5th grade and said, that's what I'm supposed to be. That's what I'm going to do. I was so intrigued, I went and joined school safety patrol right then. So I guess my law enforcement experience exceeds 40 years. I started in 5th grade. But I came from corporate America because I graduated in 75. A year before Reef was already working for 3 years. Excuse me. I didn't tell you age. But anyway, so I went into corporate America right out of high school. And I was called all kind of names when I said I wanted to be a police officer because I was making 6 figures in corporate America. And when the opportunity came, when I got that call, and I left a 6-figure job for $24,000 a year. It wasn't about the money for me. It was not about the money. It was something deep within. I went to bed thinking about it. I woke up thinking about it. I knew that's what I was supposed to do. That's what I was supposed to be. That's why I'm here on earth, was to be a police officer. So it was never a question in my mind as to what my career path would be, and I have no regrets.
Tell you the truth, I never wanted to be a police officer. I was a correction officer, and Chris Robinson, along with another officer, came to my house when I was married. They wanted to know, because the test had been frozen, and they were trying to hire within the department since I was a correction officer already. And I told them, I said, well, you can forget about me. Whatever it is, they're not hiring me. I can't change my past. I didn't have any bad record, never been arrested or juvenile or anything like that. Never used drugs. I mean, it was nothing wrong. The only thing I could think of was I was born black. And I told him, you can forget about me. I'm taking the test, and I went to Ed Squires, who's over human resources. I went to him and tried to find out, what did I do? How can I become a police officer? Because of Chris Robinson and L.B. Scott, it perked my interest. My husband had told me, if you ever become a police officer, our marriage is over. And while in the academy, he divorced me. And we had 2 kids, so, but anyway. I ended up becoming a police officer, and as I said before, the road was rough. But God has things planned that we don't. We don't see why. The same people who did not want me to become a police officer, because God knows they tried. I was called Brillo Pad. Well, first of all, I used to wear John 2 perfume cologne. It was a cheap, that's all I could afford. I was asked, you always smell the same. But not that I had an odor, but that's all I could afford. So I stopped wearing John 2 perfume. And then I was called Brillo Pad. This is my hair, and I've always had hair the blacks, and some of y'all might remember Angela Davis and Roberta Flatt. I used to have a big afro. I remember when I was baptized, the lady said, "You can take your wig off." I said, "Ma'am, I part in the middle." I said, "This is my hair." So, and then I was called Brillo Pat because I had a big afro. And then after that, I was called Watermelon Wanda, because you know all black folks eat watermelons. It was a rough road. And because of my black brothers, and since there was no other females to help me, they made sure that I stayed on the department. They were just my godsend. But like I said, and because of God's will, that's the only reason I stayed. And the other people who wanted me to leave, God knows I stayed longer than they did.
Well, I never wanted to be one either, really. My story is not all that glamorous. I really didn't have any real role models that were successful in my life. The only role model that I had was successful was my third grade teacher. She was a white lady. She was very sweet. And she was back in Ocala where I was born, and then so when we moved to Jacksonville, I didn't have her anymore. So I really didn't have any role models. I had an aunt that had done well. She could run really, really fast, and she was on track. She had gotten a scholarship to college, and she ended up getting pregnant and lost, the baby died, and she didn't go to college. That was as close to a role model as I had. So I realized I was good at track and field. I ran fast. I was on track to get a scholarship, and I was thinking that I could probably finish what my aunt wasn't able to finish. In the summer of my 11th grade year, I got pregnant. I spent the entire 12th grade year of high school pregnant. And I had my oldest daughter. I've never told this story out loud. I had my oldest daughter 2 weeks before I graduated high school. I took her to my graduation in her little, whatever that little carrier thing is, and we graduated. And when I celebrated my 30th class reunion, I said, "Come on, Juanisha, we're going on a graduation, our class reunion." And she was like, "Whatever, I don't think I'll be going down." But so anyway, so getting pregnant and spending that 12th grade year pregnant, that was the end of my track and field career and my dreams of going to college. I really wanted to be a school teacher. And so about a year after that, a young man that lived I grew up on the corner of Myrtle and Duval, and if you know anything about the area, there were these shotgun houses there. But there were houses facing this way on Duval Street, and then on Myrtle, there were houses like beside him facing this way. And so he lived here and I lived there. His name was Robert Ford. He was a policeman, and he ended up dying in the line of duty. He had a heart attack on duty. But he came back to the neighborhood one day and said, "Hey, they're hiring blacks at the sheriff's office. You should go and apply." I had nothing going. I was working as a nurse's aide. I had nothing going for myself. I wasn't a bad person. I just I hadn't found my way. And so I went down to the sheriff's office and found out that I was too young to be a police officer, so they let me be a corrections officer. I did about 2 years in the jail, and they let me transfer over to the police side, but I wasn't quite old enough to carry a gun. So they let me go through the police academy, and by the time I would graduate, I would be old enough to carry a gun. And so that's how my career in law enforcement started. And the beauty of it all was, God always knows best. The beauty of it all was I always wanted to be a teacher. I always wanted to work with children. Even when I was 10, 12 years old, I can remember going down to the elementary school and volunteering in the summertime. Almost every single job that I had in the sheriff's office involved me working with children. I spent 10 years at one middle school. I ran girls programs. I worked at the police athletic league. I mean, I was just, everywhere I went in the sheriff's office, I was surrounded by children. Even when I worked as a sex crimes detective, they gave me the juvenile cases. So that was the beauty of my career as a law enforcement officer. So I always say that God has a plan for us. We think that we know what the plan is, but we have to trust His plan. And so it's been a beautiful ride for me, and I'm thankful for it.
My story is a little different. I came from a small town called Lake City, about 97 miles west of here. I grew up getting off the sidewalk so whites could pass. I went to the back doors of the restaurants so I could obtain food. We had fountains that were numerated, colored, white. By the time I went in the military and spent four years there in the United States Air Force, I came out to a rude awakening when I was coming through the Atlanta airport. I was hungry. I stood at a long counter. The people who were waiting on individuals would walk up to me, turn around and go back on either side. I was never fed. I came to Jacksonville to go to school. They had a place called Massey Technical Institute. It was a ripoff of the government's money. But I did learn a little about electronics. But one night when four of the guys who stayed on Louisiana Street with a lady named Miss Holly, we were Holly's boys because she kept us straight. We were coming from the movie one night and an officer approached us and asked us, "Where are you inwards going?" And we said, "We just left the movies. We're going home. And did you steal anything tonight?" And one of the guys had been to Vietnam and still had his M16. And when the officer left, he said, "I'm going to kill somebody tonight." And the rest of us took the rest of the night trying to calm him down. He said, "I didn't go and fight for this country to come back to be treated like this." They had in the paper an advertisement for officers. So we were all talking and said, well, we could go down and get on the department and be a change. 4 of us went down, I was the only one that passed. And that was my start on this department. It was to try and be a change. And there were 4 or 5, maybe 6 of us who had the same mindset. And we actually made changes. We actually made changes. And I can say L.B. Scott, Lewis Calloway Williams, Anthony Rogers, a real stalwart young man who had no filter on his mouth. And as my friend just said, none at all, and he didn't. But he believed that we could make a difference, and we did. We changed things. We really did. And that was my story.
Thank you so much for your stories. I'd like you to, if you could, stay where you were chronologically at that point in your lives, and now I want you to project forward a little bit, if you could, to that first night, your first night on the job. I'd like you to center on 2 things. First, images, things you remember seeing that night, and then feelings, the way those images made you feel. If you could share those with us.
We'll start from the oldest end. Thank you. I remember my first night clearly, scared to death. At that time, an individual by the name of Robert George was my training officer. We rode Ashley Street, beats 302, 4, and 5. They were the roughest black beats in the city at that time. And he said, "Stay on your P's and Q's. And son, you so green that if a cow walked by now, he'd eat you." And I was this small time kid from this small country town in the big city and seeing things that I had never seen before. People acting in ways I had never seen before. So it was a new experience. And after this man who became like a father figure among others, who said, I'm going to be honest with you, I have done some things, along with some other officers out here, that I'm not proud of. He said, but I am going to make you a police officer. I'm going to teach you how to be a police officer, how to treat people, how to talk to people. And he did. And I thank God for that man and many others who grew this country boy into what I thought was a rather decent police officer.
My first night, so I told you I grew up on that corner of Myrtle and Duval, and my bus stop was at Ashley and Davis. So I walked every day through Ashley and Davis Street to get to my bus stop to go to school when I was in school, and that was when it was bustling. Like Ashley and Davis was prostitutes, pimps, drug dealers, you name it, that's what it was. And so I had that experience. So I really wasn't afraid of anything, and I thought I knew, kind of what I was going to be facing. When I first started, I was actually riding with another officer, obviously, because I was still in my recruitment phase. But the very first night that I started, I was assigned to the Lackawanna area. You're familiar with that area? It's near Edison and Lenox Avenue, that area. But we were riding in the neighborhood back then. There were beats, and you had an area that you rode. You weren't everywhere. And that very first night, I'll never forget it. There was a 14-year-old young man that was shot and killed that night. And it's not a blur, but when I think about it, if you've ever seen like a scene in a movie where it's just mayhem, everybody's running around and screaming, and there's just so much happening, and it seems like it would never stop. That's how it was. I can remember them putting a white blanket over him, and it seemed like he laid there in the street for hours and hours and hours. But the thing that I remember the most, and that really made me want to really make a difference, is the supervisor at the time. He's deceased now, but the sergeant on the scene at the time was an older white male. I was the only female, and definitely the only black female, but the only female that was riding in the zone, the entire zone. And they hadn't had one, so this was all new to them. But he came up to me and a couple other officers that were standing there. He walked right up to me. I guess I must have had that look on my face, and he said, "Get used to it. This is what they do to each other." That's what my supervisor told me, and that left a lasting impact on me. It made me want to help, to make a difference.
My first day on the street I was scared, didn't know what to expect, but I definitely did not expect the white officers, the male officers, to tell the supervisors my wife would not allow me to ride with the N-word. So, they had labeled me in the academy as a militant. Anthony Rogers, the one that Chris Robinson had talked about, he had to come and see who it was because they did everything they could. The first black female in the academy, Lucille Thurston, they ran her crazy. Actually crazy. She came, because every time in the academy she would open her mouth, they would tell her to shut up. She came to muster with tape on her mouth. They even had to commit her to a mental institution. And I think that's what their desire was to do to me, was to get me next to her in the mental institution. But as I said before, God had something else for me. They didn't, like I said, I don't know how you can tell your supervisors what your wife tell you what to do, that you can't ride. They're riding in a police car. They're being paid by the sheriff's office, but your wife run you, then you need to leave. They should have told you that you need to go. But instead, Anthony Rogers, they had him to train me. And because no one else would train me, he was the only one that would train me. Because, as I said, I was the first black. So there was no one else to train me. And you talk about being scared, or afraid, or whatever it is. But Rogers, the one who did not know how to talk, would tell you from A to Z in every word you can imagine that you don't want to imagine, was my training officer. And other than that, all I can remember is just not having anyone to try to train me and let them tell them what to do to me. Even after the first day, I would have calls like domestic violence, where it was mandatory 2 people would have to go up. They wouldn't even show up. I had to handle that call by myself because they did not want to show up. They wanted something to happen to me, but there was an arm around over me. But anyway, much.
My first day was actually the first night. I started on the midnight shift, rookie. Just like everybody else, scared to death, nervous, didn't really know what to expect, but happy to be there. You made it through the academy, now you're in training. You got to go through 3.5 months of training in the field with the training officer. So it was a January night. It was cold. The first thing that I learned was that you ride with your windows down in the winter as a police officer. At least have it cracked far enough where you can hear everything that's going on. And I was totally surprised because in the wintertime, as a civilian, I always had my windows up and the heat going, but with the window down, you hear so many things that you really don't think about that happen. Riding in the Arlington area at that time, it was pretty quiet up until about 2:30 when after the bars closed. I'm thinking we're going to get a DUI call or observe somebody driving erratic or whatever. Well, it was at a bar where a guy decided he didn't want to leave, he didn't want to go home, and he was lit. So I learned that night that you can't reason with a person that's lit. Coming from corporate America, I'm trying to reason with him, say, hey, look, let's do this. F you. You didn't have that gun in bed, I'll kick you, you know what. I'm looking at the training officer, he kind of smiling, because he's been doing this for a while. And I said to him, can I take it off? So that didn't work out. So we had to properly restrain him to get him in the car. And you can interpret that any way you want to. But he didn't want to go. But we properly restrained him. And then at the end of the shift, I said, man, I kind of like this. Okay, let's get ready for tomorrow. But fortunately, it was not too eventful that night because they were riding what we call a bottom in those areas. And I guess Arlington was the top, if you will. So it wasn't a whole lot of things going on other than people, they had more DUI arrests in that area versus violent crimes that was going on. But I had an opportunity during training to ride in all the other areas to experience the things that they were experiencing in those hot areas, those high areas. But that was my first night.
So I wish we could go on for so much longer, but I want to allow time for questions. Do we want to move into that now? Alan, do you think that would be? Okay. So I definitely want to give anyone here the opportunity. I don't want to take up all the time to ask any questions of these wonderful public servants. Does anyone have a question? How should we do
If a young African American comes up to you for advice or says, I'm thinking about, or should I go into the enforcement career, you actually encourage him or say, well, you know,
I was gonna say it depends on whether they're a family member or not, but I wouldn't.
I was going to echo that because I have 3 sons and I've not encouraged them at all to follow in my footsteps. And simply because police work has changed so much since the 70s, the 80s, and whatever. There's no respect anymore for law enforcement. There's very little respect. You know, used to be a police officer ask you something or tell you something, it was met with respect, that mutual respect. But now it's F the police, you don't tell me what to do, I've got rights and this, that, and the other, which everybody has rights to do. I can remember as a little boy, my dad had 6 boys and 1 daughter. I was one of the 7 children. We were coming from church one night from Callahan, living over off of Cleveland Road. We got pulled over by the police. And, you know, 6 children in the backseat of a car, you know, you got windows hanging out, you know, all over the place, no car seat laws or whatever. And he also walks up and he says, and now I knew, in my mind, I knew already that I wanted to be a police officer. But he walks up to the car and he says, let me see your license, boy. Now, we're sitting in the back, we're scared. We don't know what's going on, other than the lights are going on in the back, you got a police officer there, and he's calling my dad boy. My dad complies, he gives him the license. Where you going, boy, with all these children? Y'all don't know how to stop? You know how it works, don't you? You know, he's just being very demeaning and whatever. That actually encouraged me even the more to want to be a police officer, like Chris was talking about, to try to execute some kind of change and some kind of sensibility in that particular profession. But no, I have not and I will not encourage my sons to be a police officer.
I guess I have a different perspective on that. I would let anyone who came up and asked me, I would tell them that I had, even though it was difficult, a career that was help. I actually helped people. I was also a hostage negotiator. And out of 22 negotiations for people who own bridges and cars and homes, I only lost 2 people. And I found that to be, someone has said, everyone in this world should try and get 1 life, should try and save 1 life. And I like to tell everyone, I got my quota, and I'm still trying. And to get someone into this profession, I tell them all the negatives, tell them the positives, and then let them make the decision. That would be their decision, not mine. But here's what you're going to face. Here are the things that I've seen. Here are the things that I continue to see. You see the news every day. We are still good, doing good work, and you see that. But we do have bad apples. But then we're not the only profession that has bad apples. There are bad teachers, bad lawyers, bad everything.
Politicians.
True. So I would like for them, and to kind of put it in perspective, I see every class that graduates from the police academy. I have them for 8 hours. During that time, I try and instill upon them, and Jefferson said something about respect. I tell every one of them, just because you put on a uniform, a gun, and a badge, you're not due respect. Respect is something that is earned. If you give it, you'll get it. I say, so be that kind of an officer. And I always ask one class, and I'll end this, what's the difference between you and your friends who you became a police officer, they went the other way. Or most of them shake their head. Well, it was a life choice. I made a good decision. I said, no, you ran with them. They got caught, you didn't. And what I want you to remember is that once you get out there and start doing your brand of policing.
Yes. You partially answered this, but I was going to say, how do you think the police force is doing today, and what changes would you like to see in the next few years?
We recently had a meeting with then Sheriff Williams, and I told him the problems that we are seeing today are the ones that I saw 50 years ago. I say, and that's a problem. We have lost something. We have lost our respect for each other in some ways. We say and do things that I have no definition for it. So I'm seeing, after 50 years, and I'm seeing things that were done in the 70s being repeated now, and I don't know why. Our society has changed. That's all I can say. Our society has changed, and our people are not as cordial, as Jefferson said, as we once were with each other. We need to get back to that. Our officers now, when we talk to them, they need to be taught that they are public servants, that you pay for them to give you good law enforcement. You deserve that. And that's what I expect people to do.
Just to further add a little bit to that, I agree with what he said. I do know that the current administration is striving every day to try to right some wrongs that's been existing for quite some time within the organization that you may or may not be aware of, some things. And then try to transfer that same mentality onto the streets to try to build trust back with the community. Because when you start seeing these national stories of cops going bad and doing different things, and cops officers getting arrested and things of that nature, it resonates in your mind. Okay, what's going on here in Jacksonville that we don't know about or that we see? I think to date there have been, I'm not sure of the number, but over 5 officers arrested so far, which means that they are policing their own through the integrity unit, as well as other ways that they find out things that's happening that officers need to be investigated. So they're trying to show and do their due diligence into policing the agency in and of itself. So every day I know that the majority of the officers, outside of those who have ill intent, that wear their uniform, they're trying every day to build that trust back up that's been broken for quite some time.
If we could give a round of applause.
May I make a quick comment?
Yes, you
Thank
may.
you. I just wanted to say she's gonna kill me because she never likes to be recognized. But on the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office Facebook page right now, there's a picture out there that's come across my screen probably 10 times in the last week of Retha at her training officer, Anthony Rogers. Have you seen it? It's been floating around for a couple of years, but it's back on the rotation list. So if you are on the Sheriff's Office Facebook page and you run across that picture of it, delete it. Just to put some context to who Anthony Rogers is. He's deceased now, but just to put some context to it, and you can see her back in her younger Afro days.